Welcome to the Amplifying Leadership podcast. I am your host, Tara Lehman, a partner, coach, and consultant at Twin Life Coaching and Business Services, of which Amplifying Leadership is a division. This podcast is a place dedicated to amplifying your leadership through our awesome guest stories, tips, information, and more. To learn more about our leadership division, please visit us at amplifyingleadership.ca. Today, I am welcoming Trent Gander, a writer and consultant. Welcome to Amplifying Leadership.
Happy to be here.
So before we get started, let's tell our audience a little bit about you or your leadership story.
Well, the aspect of leadership started very early on with me. I grew up in a very religious organization, and over the years, I saw a lot of good and bad leadership, poor attempts at leadership, and it's still one of those issues that still plagues my religious community to this day. That's not very much of a surprise, as that's kind of the law of the world, of that you get good guys and you get bad guys, and you get people who don't know what they're doing, you get people who should be better at what they're doing, but somehow aren't.
Very true. Good and bad leadership totally exists in the world, that is for sure. And we see it in organizations. It doesn't matter what type of organization it's in. So let's get to your topic, and I'm very curious about it. So you mentioned that you like to talk about the boring ease of good leadership and its parental role. So why don't we start talking about what does that mean?
Well, at the simplest format, good leadership is boring. There's nothing going on. There's no turbulence. There's no rough sections. There's everything just kind of works. And I'm sure we've all seen the posts online of people trying to get some sort of rage bait, like, oh my goodness, I'm in a relationship with a healthy individual. There's nothing I can complain about. There's nothing that I can latch on to and be completely illogical about. I don't know what to do with all this extra energy. And it's the same thing in leadership. When things are going nicely, people start to kind of look around and see, what can I make a problem, or what can I use to spice up the situation when everything is working perfectly? I think that's just part of how humanity has built things, that we were in much more turbulent times, where we were in much more dangerous situations throughout most of our developmental history. And when everything is going okay, there's a little part of our paranoid brain that goes, what's the catch? And then we start looking for the catch, and in return, we make that catch, and then we capitalize it, and then that nice running system breaks down. Which brings us to the parental side of things. Good parents are going to help regulate their household. They're going to make sure everything is running smoothly. They're going to listen to your problems. They're going to help you solve them. They're going to give you the boost that you need in order to be able to solve some of those problems yourselves or overcome an obstacle. And leadership is very much, I hate using the term familial when it comes to a business position, because every time someone says, we're a family here at this business, that is the most dysfunctional company you will ever work with. But it still doesn't change the fact that when you are a leader, you are in charge of someone very similar to how a parent is in charge of their children. And the religious side of things likes to put this as servant leadership or pastoral leadership. So you have to care and take care of individuals who may not be well equipped for taking care of themselves in the role that they're in. So you kind of have to guide them. You have to not necessarily beat them into submission or beat them back in line. Sometimes you do, and it's very rare that that is actually required. But sometimes they just need a little nudge, a little course correct to back into what they actually need to be doing. Because sometimes I've encountered this with my own family and my friends, that sometimes something happens and they just discombobulate, and they're all looking at everything else but the thing that they're supposed to be doing, because they are so in an emotional state that's like, hey, let's calm this down. Let's bring it back. All right, let's focus on what we can control. Let's focus on what we're supposed to be doing. And that's going to help us get through this. And that aspect of leadership I see is not necessarily naturally taught nor naturally acquired, because most people have the examples of bad leadership, because bad leadership is very loud, very in your face. You're going to do what I tell you to do because I'm in charge. Whack, 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 whack. And that brings us full circle. The boring ease of good leadership. Good leaders will communicate information to you very clearly, very cleanly, very calmly, and you're not going to be left guessing. You're not, am I on their bad side? Are they on their good side? What's going on? It's like, hey, this is what I need out of you right here, right now. This is what you're going to get out of it. This is our goals as a company, as a team, as a whatever. And as long as there's communication back and forth, like, hey, I can't do X, Y, and Z. All right, we'll find an alternative. We'll work this out. That flow of communication is necessary, and we see that in families, in groups, and everything. As long as there's communication that's freely flowing back, and everyone's trying to understand each other and work toward that common goal, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be fine. I'm not saying there aren't gonna be bumps in the road. Things come up unexpectedly. That's fine. They're easier to deal with when you know your boss has your back, or your leader, or the people that you're leading. As long as you're like, hey, we're going to get this done and we're going to get it done together, you're going to have a good time, especially because you're communicating what that
Mm-hmm.
actually means, what I expect out of you.
Yes, and it's very interesting. I want to come back to a point you made, which is about you don't have to be loud. I always say good leadership isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's being about the person others will gladly follow. You don't have to be the loud person. So I'm wondering because, you're right, people see the loud person as the one that we hear and see the most because the good leaders are already helping, or supporting or whatever those things are. How would you define, or even what are the different skill sets in your opinion between what that good leader does, and you've alluded to a couple, and what that bad leader does? And we're not saying the bad leaders are bad because they were taught that way. We're just saying that maybe they weren't taught to be good leaders. But what are those differences between them that you see?
So the barest bones one is communication.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be, as a leader and as a follower, I need to be as clear cut as I can with everything that I'm communicating. I don't need any uhs. I don't need any guesses. I don't need to have my people be mind readers. I don't need to expect my group to be able to read my mind because I've tried really, really hard to develop the skill. It only works like 10% of the time. I cannot absolutely read somebody else's mind, know for sure what they're thinking, what they're doing, and what they want. And there's a number of people who I've encountered throughout my life who expect that to be like the norm. You are to know what I need before I need it and have it ready by the
Mm-hmm.
time that I ask you. And so when I say, do you have the thing? And I say, what do you mean? Uh, that creates the issue because that want and desire was not expressed to me so that I can go do what I'm asked of, or the other people aren't getting the things that I requested of them. That communication and that uh, I think a lot. I talk to myself a lot, and I spent a lot of time going through processes and methodologies over and over and over again. I spent most of today prepping for this, thinking about what am I going to say? How am I going to do that? But eventually that stuff has to get outside of my head. And unfortunately, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people like to stay in their head. And while they're thinking of it, it doesn't come out their mouth or come out into the text or come out in whatever they're writing that they're giving to the people that they're leading or being led by. And then when people don't know that, they're shocked and surprised and horrified that you wouldn't know exactly what I'm thinking in this very moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, communication for me is one of those hot topics where it does make a difference. It makes a huge difference, between a good leader and a poor leader. And we're never taught exactly what we're supposed to do. So it's about learning and listening and growing, those types of things. And I want to touch on the whole idea of knowing everything or even knowing what you're thinking. Like, we can't possibly. I'm an identical twin. I don't possibly know what my sister is thinking all the time. Do we have some of the same random thoughts? Sure. But we can't possibly know what each other is thinking. So, how could the rest of the world know what their employees are thinking if they're a leader in this example, right? So, knowing everything is something that they don't have to know. So if they don't know everything and yet they're communicating, is there a way or strategies in which they can then say, I don't know, but let's talk, or something like that you would think about?
Well, being direct is usually the best way. And I think that there has been, at least because most of my experience is with the English speaking world.
Hmm.
Most people who are speaking English in a business or leadership format, there is a lot of pride that comes into English speaking cultures.
Hmm.
And I can't admit that I don't know something. It's that old story from way back in the day. The emperor has no clothes. No one can admit that when they're wrong. No one can admit when they've been taken advantage of. No one can admit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that it takes a lot of strength to break that down, especially if you're a leader.
Hmm.
People look up to you. People tend to like to do some a little bit of idol worship with their favorite leader. And that is something I have to thank my parents for, that they were very much honest with us. Like, hey, we're people too. We make mistakes. We're doing
Hmm.
as best we can right here, right now. And you have to communicate to the people that you're leading, and you have to communicate that to your leader. It's like, hey, somebody, there was a death in the family like 2 to 3 days ago. I'm not in a good headspace. I may not be able to do this job to the extent that you want me to, because I'm thinking about all the stuff
Hmm.
with the funeral and getting my family there, and mourning the loss of a loved one and all this other stuff that starts to crowd into our mental space. And there's some interesting studies that show that people can only focus on 5 things at once, and that's sliding them in and out over time in any given high stress situation. And if that's what you can do in the high stress, you probably can do either a little less or just about the same in low stress situations. But people keep getting everything coming in. I've got my Instagram to take care of, my Facebook, my business, my family, my community, the dog down the road, the dog up the road, all these other things that we're expected to be able to handle all at once. And scheduling comes into this, being able to have like assistants and other stuff, and that creates the entire infrastructure of our lives.
Hmm.
But it still doesn't change the fact that the human hardware can only handle so much. And we're expecting supermen, and we look at the individuals who are shooting for the stars and are able to do it, and those 1% or less than 1% of individuals who can do it all is not the average individual, but
Hmm.
people want that person to be the one
Yeah.
that they're either as their employee, their follower, or their leader. And I can't tell you how many times I have looked at job applications where it's just like, we want an entry level position, we want a master's degree, we want 20 years of
Mhm.
experience, we also want somebody who's 18 years old and
Yeah.
can bench 250. And it's like many of these requests that you have don't actually apply to this job. They're just nice things to have. There's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with them inherently, but for this $12 to $15 an hour of sorting mail, I don't necessarily need to know nuclear physics. I need to know
Right.
how to sort the
Yeah.
mail.
Yes. Yes, I can appreciate that for sure. There is something about recruiting. It to me is just it's crazy, but that's a whole other conversation about how can we properly recruit in ads. I want to come back to the perfectionist side because a lot of leaders who struggle are too much on the perfectionist side and not recognizing that they're not perfect, that we need to admit our mistakes when we make them instead of saying, no, that was Trent's fault. Even as a leader, we're pointing blame somewhere else. Yeah, he's pointing just because you can't see us. He's pointing. But really owning our mistakes and admitting our mistakes is, I think, the biggest piece almost. And you can tell me your thoughts on this. On building that trust within a team.
Well, there's a quote, I believe it's from Edison, when he was talking about the development of the light bulb. He was saying, you failed so many times. Like, no, I found 99 ways on how not to build a light bulb.
Hmm.
And it really started somewhere around the 2000s, I want to say. There was a big push for extreme inclusion in things like schools and other stuff where you were not allowed to fail. And failure in and of itself is valuable information that you can then take apart and figure out what went wrong, how to do things better the next time. Because if everything goes smoothly, you don't really learn anything. You just keep doing the thing, and then all of a sudden something bad happens, and you're thrown for a complete loop. And if you've never
Yeah.
experienced a failure before, you can't analyze that information accurately. And I like things as a scientific position. It's like, all right, we've got a result. Was this a good result? Was it a bad result? Why? And it's so natural to me because I think in systems. I've mentioned it a couple times already. Everything is interconnected with itself and with everything else around it. And we can take bits and pieces of each of the system and look at them individually and break those down even further. We can break them up even further. It goes up and down. And people need to fail. There are certain things
Mhm.
that just have to happen. We're too concerned with trying to make sure that everyone feels okay because no one's ever going to feel okay 100% of the time. There's absolutely just stuff that's going to a bolt from the blue is going to ruin your day someday, sometime. I don't know when. And if we have no experience with dealing with that, the first time it happened is going to be the worst thing we've ever experienced.
Mhm.
And when we have leaders who've never experienced that, followers and employees who've never experienced that, everyone's having the same bad day at the same time. And
Yeah.
that just compounds the issue so badly. And I think we need to encourage more people. This is going to sound really bad. We need to encourage people to fail or at least accept that failure is an option because you're going to learn more things by failing than you are always having a good time.
hmm And I actually have a published quote that I say, failure is transformational. Listen to it, learn from it, grow because of it. Because if you don't learn to fail and fail forward, meaning we can learn from what didn't go well, then we can't improve, like you said, right, about the light bulb. But then also, you, as you alluded to as well, is let's learn from what went well. Let's not just learn from what failed. Learning from what failed is very vital because we don't want to make those same mistakes twice, or let's figure out how we can change it going forward. But learning from what went well can actually help us too. And I think that when it comes to communication and the positiveness, a lot of leaders who aren't as good are not as good at communicating things that are actually going well and saying thank you or that was great, those types of things. They're focused on you didn't do this. This is an error you made. What are you going to fix this? Instead of having that positiveness around it. What are your thoughts around that?
It's interesting that you brought this up because this came up with my dry runs of this conversation, which was a lot of the time praise is unfortunately used as a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't just praise people when they're working within our little box.
Mm-hmm.
If they've done a good job, they've done a good job, and they need to know that, and we need to reinforce that so that they themselves will have the confidence to, go out and fail. It's like, hey, if it fails because we're hiring you to research this problem and you failed, well, that's another data point that we have to deal with. But if I only rag on you for or communicate with you when you've done something bad, then we start to get people to see every single email, every single text, every single call from their leader, from their thing as something bad. Oh no, what's the
Mm-hmm.
problem? And this is something that bothers me in some of the casual conversation that I get engaged with, which was if somebody is having a conversation and there sounds like something going on, someone will come in and say, "What's the problem?" There was no problem in the
Mm.
conversation up until that point, but there's already the assumption that something has gone bad, despite the fact that there's just communication going back and forth over kind of nothing that is a problem at all. And so I've seen that some people have a bad habit of what I refer to as preloading a conversation, is they will
Yes.
say things ahead of time that puts a slant or a bias in the conversation before any of the information has been presented. A good example of this is going to make somebody mad. It's like I'm already mad from you saying that. I don't need to hear
Mm.
anything else. Or what is it?
Yeah, it's like the wall goes up, right? And it's something I talk about a lot is let's stop making assumptions because our predictive brain gets ahead of us. So we have to retrain that predictive brain to stop making those assumptions. But instead of what's the problem, why don't we walk into the room and say, how can I help you guys with a solution? Rather
Yeah.
than what's the problem, right? It's a totally different. The wall goes up with one, the wall comes way down with the other, and we're just more focused on a solution now rather than just dwelling on an issue, right?
Yeah, take the Marvin Gaye approach. What's going on?
Yes, yeah, what's going on? But let's keep it positive. I also want to come back to the praise and really keeping it authentic. So, yes, it's easy to say thank you. right? And
Mhm.
we love to hear it. We're humans. We love praise. But if you hear thank you all the time, but you don't know what you're being thanked for. I remember walking down the hallway and just heard, "Thank you, Tara." I'm thinking, I wonder what that was for. It's not
Yeah.
authentic. It's just thank you. Thank you for what? Right?
Yeah. The questions that a lot of people, especially in the problem solving positions, their mind goes a mile a minute.
Hmm.
It's just constantly going. And then there's like, hey, we're talking about the thing that you probably passed mentally 30 miles ago, and we're still back here because we're out here. We're having the conversation out in the open, and that open thing is a lot slower than a lot of people's internal methods. And whether they
Hmm.
have the internal dialogue, the pictures, the nod, the instinct, that is going much faster than the world around us is. This is one of the reasons why we standardize time so everyone kind of has an idea of what's going on, but somebody can just be sitting there daydreaming a million miles away, and it's been 2 seconds since this conversation started.
Hmm.
And everyone else is still there, still registering that a conversation has started. And
Hmm.
that is one of those things that a leader needs to be able to understand, that people process things at different rates at different times.
Yeah.
They process them in different ways. I like text because I can go back. I skim text so much. I really do. I have to read something 2 or 3 times, especially if it's an email, to make sure I got everything out of it. But I need that to be able to be there so I can actually go back when somebody tells me this thing as I'm trying to remember it. They've moved on to something else and then on to something else. And my notes are starting to get
Hmm.
more and more frantic as I'm trying to remember what they said 2 things ago.
Yeah. Becomes overwhelming too. If you're trying to lead that way, your people are going to be so overwhelmed. They're not going to know what's going on. Like you have to know your audience, who needs processing time, who doesn't need processing time, right?
Yeah,
Let,
or keep everything extremely simple.
Yes, absolutely. And concise. Like, let's keep it simple and concise with communication. Let me ask you this. I'm wondering if there's a few strategies you have for a leader who wants to improve communication. Maybe they are a bit of a perfectionist, or they are a person who dwells on failure and they want to improve. Are there some strategies that you could suggest that they could at least start with to help them become a better leader around communication?
Write and write how you speak, because you're going to be able to visualize any of the unnecessary parts of your
Mm.
communication. When I was growing up and in school, they referred to this as purple prose, the unnecessary fluff that goes into a lot of
Mm.
students' work that's just there to fill up that word count.
Hmm.
Once you can identify what that is, you can strip it out. And then you only say what's left over. And you can start looking through it that way. And then that starts practicing and practicing until you're only communicating the important things verbally once you realize what you're doing in writing. And I know writing isn't everybody's thing. My profession is writing, and that's fine. I'm not saying that you have to go out and write a book. I'm saying that you should probably write like 1 page of your thoughts down. It can be on computer, it can be on paper if your handwriting is good enough. I know mine is not. Um, but once you can visualize what it is, you can start physically cutting things out from the things. I can delete this part. Oh, this is the part where I went on a giant tangent on something else. And then you can see, okay, this is how I'm going to
Mhm.
prioritize information. In fact, I've encountered a lot of times with my own personal family is that I prioritize information different. I have one, two, three, four, but I consistently experience with my family, they go like 4, 3, 2, 1 or something like that, where the
Mhm.
information that I use to ground myself in the conversation is 2 to 3 steps into the process as they're processing things. And because they process, put it out there, I process, put it out, and put it in like, hey, this is what we're talking about. I get
Mhm.
dragged into the conversation. And then we're talking about something. I'm just like, what are we talking about? And then 5 minutes later, they bring up what we're actually talking about. And then I've got to take all the stuff from the previous part of the conversation, drag
Right.
it in, reallocate everything. And then I finally understand,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, this is what they're asking me. And if we can tighten that up, if we can just make it so like, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about. Here are my concerns. Here are my expectations. Here's the desired result. If we can keep that within a nice 1 to 5 point thing, or less, we can have really good communication consistently in text, in speech, audio recordings, and whatever it is, and smoke
Mhm.
signals if you want.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to writing too, I used to encourage people, and I still do, read it out loud if you're not sure you're going to communicate to be understood, right? If you think there's too much fluff, not enough details, whatever, read it out loud because you're right. Like when you actually can reread it, rewrite it, or rehear it, you actually sometimes can catch that quote unquote fluff or where we're not being concise enough, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. One of the tricks of copywriting is to have somebody read your copy to you. And if you're
Mm,
just like, man, that absolutely sucks. I don't like that part. Oh, wait, I wrote that. Oh no, I've got to fix that. Or have somebody come
yeah.
back and say, hey, this is the parts that I got really lost in. Can you clarify this? There's entire
Mhm.
industries of editors and proofreaders and everything else built around clearing up people's communications because there's a lot of really smart, really knowledgeable people who put their thoughts on paper and think that's enough. And unfortunately for them and us, that is not enough a lot of the time.
Yeah. So I think we could go on forever today about communication and poor versus good leaders around that. But what if we wrap up today by you letting us know what is the key takeaway for our leaders today? If from our whole conversation, is there something you want them to leave with?
I want leaders to understand that every single individual and every single organization is a combination of about 20 different societal and cultural meetups
Hmm.
and crossovers. Everyone's has 17 different things that shape them into what they are, or that's hyperbolic. It could be more, it could be less. Everyone's coming from a different perspective, from a different lifetime, from a different culture. And if you don't take that into account, you might cross a line with somebody that you didn't even know was a line, and all you did was
Hmm.
say, "Hi, how are you?"
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's a great takeaway. I think it's really important to recognize that. Again, knowing your audience too, right? Really who you're talking to.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for these wonderful insights today. If our audience wanted to find you online or learn more about you, is there a way that they can do that or a website you want to direct them to?
Well, the easiest way to find me would be on Facebook. However, it
All
is
right.
much better for them to find me on Trent's Freelance Writing on YouTube, a small channel that I'm starting to grow, and they can find some of my other stuff connected there as well.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for sharing everything and some tips today, too, Trent.
It was my pleasure.
Of course, we thank you, our audience. We hoped you gained some valuable insights or tips today from our conversation with Trent. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a great rating. This helps us and our guests like Trent reach even more leaders with these helpful stories, tips, and advice. We love helping leaders grow and thrive. We would love for you to consider our brand new Amplifying Leadership Circle community. More information is found at amplifyingleadership.ca/community-info. Leadership is better when we do it together. For more information about all of our leadership services, please visit us anytime at amplifyingleadership.ca, a division of Twin Life Coaching and Business Services. Until next time, remember, leadership matters.